Get out of my face. I don't take very kindly to threats.
Fine, but he's the last, you understand? Then I want your answer. I didn't think this was gonna turn into some goddamn podcast. There isn't time for that.
What's happening, Hellspawn? Welcome back to Spawnography. I'm one of your hosts, George Marston, they, them, she, her, and I'm here with my co-host,
Pierce Ladden, they, them. My voice hurts already from doing Tremor. Now that that's decided to be the voice, now it's just going to hurt
good.
my voice every
sounded
day.
good.
So that sounded pretty cool, I thought.
Yeah.
It'll sound cooler after I've worked some magic, I guess. But
Yeah.
So whatever you're hearing, dear listener, I hope it sounds cool. George, how you doing? It's a rare Friday record for us.
Yeah.
How's your week going?
It's not been too bad. It's been pretty busy at work relatively, and I've just been hanging in there. My work, by the way, Newsarama, is not represented. Their views are not represented in this podcast.
Interesting.
I know. It's an interesting point of view to have, but it's the one I'm sticking with. But yeah, no, it's been pretty good. I love my job, so when it's hard work, even then, it's still, kind of just reading and writing about comic books. The last thing that I did today at work was I scheduled a big interview for next week. I won't say what it is, but it's about a book that was just announced that I think is really cool. So I'm excited to get to interview the creative team for that. And by the time this comes out, the interview will be done and published. So I don't know why I'm hiding. Whatever.
Yeah, I guess you don't have to hide it. I can tell you exactly when this will come out. So it's up to you.
Well, I'm interviewing the creative team of the new Black Canary comic, so I'm really excited about
cool.
that. Yeah.
I didn't realize there was one.
Oh, yeah. It's like she fights Lady Shiva for the title of like the greatest hand-to-hand fighter in the DC universe.
You like Black Canary generally?
I actually
made her like the singer of a band for a while.
Yeah, that was cool. It had its downsides on the creative side, which we won't get into. But it also had its upsides in Annie Wu. Her art was great.
That's true.
That's true. But I actually love Black Canary. I'm a huge Black Canary fan, and now I'm the little nerd that grew up loving the Justice Society.
Yes, you are.
Yes,
we've talked about this before.
I loved All-Star Squadron, but I really loved Jeff Johns' Justice Society and his Black Canary, his Dinah Lance, the younger, is really great in that, I thought, and she was very interesting. She's interestingly not. She's in a romantic relationship with Dr. Midnight, Peter McNider, like the younger, newer at that time. That's cool. I thought that was cool. So that made me get into all types of different versions of the character, and of course, I love Gail Simone's Black Canary in Birds of Prey. So yeah, I'm a huge fan actually. So it's going to be a fun interview. Hopefully. I think that should be published, the interview, by the time this is on Spotify.
I'll remind you before this.
You won't have to blurp it.
I'll remind you before this comes out, just in case.
Perfect.
When I edit. Anyway, we got a little two-parter today. It's a return of one of our friends.
Yeah.
Tremor himself.
I
think we're starting to feel the effects of this one-on, one-off for Greg. For the main art team of Greg Capullo and Todd McFarlane
versus
Tony Daniel and Kevin Conrad.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more, even as we'll get into it when we get into the book. But I think we were saying this just before we started recording. I think Tony Daniel and Kevin Conrad are getting better, but every time you start to get into their art, you're immediately taken back to frankly, a superior art team. And we've talked about why that could be: the experience they have, the tone of their art. It's it's not Tony Daniel and Kevin Conroy's fault, or Kevin Conrad's fault. My God.
It'd be crazy if it was Kevin Conroy.
Right, wouldn't it? Kevin Conrad's fault that they're being always compared back and forth. And it's even worse. It serves them even worse to be reading this in short form, like binging it almost, because especially when we're reading two-parters where we're getting one Tony Daniel, one Greg Capullo back to back, almost every little sequence, it's really tough on Tony Daniel. And I think obviously it's the first thing we've been talking about with this. And I want to say that I think we should remember that the circumstances under which we're viewing Tony Daniel's art here, it's not that he's a bad artist.
No,
it's not even that the art in these issues is particularly bad or anything. I actually think it's better than a lot of the previous issues they've done. But when you stack it right next to that Greg Capullo issue,
I do think also that Greg in 47 gets a little bit more to draw.
Yeah.
And I think the big difference between the two of them at this point in time is that Greg, because maybe it's because Todd is inking him also, that it's reminding us a little bit more of those early issues of Spawn. So it's helpful, even though Danny Miki gets an end credit
right
for the inking here. But I think that Greg has figured out what a Todd McFarlane Spawn page looks like,
right,
and how to emulate it in a way that
he's had that benefit of working closely with Todd.
Right. And I don't think like, obviously Todd has given direction to Tony Daniel and Kevin Conrad, and they have access to the books themselves to read, but
right.
It's just a different vibe. I think the script on 47 is a little bit better than 46 in terms of like
we'll get into why that
comics,
is.
But
before we get into the script though, hit us with those credits, my friend.
Yeah, so we're going to start with Spawn number 46, The Road to 50 continues here.
That's right.
This is Image Comics. Oh, I'm going to say, actually, the cover, we never really talk about the covers.
That's
which
right.
is a shame.
Well, they don't put them in the compendiums, which I also
so you don't really
wish
see
they
them
did.
always.
Yeah.
Todd, if you're listening,
I should look them up, I guess.
Put the covers into the compendiums. Why not? Put them at the end. Who cares? Anyway, the cover for 46 is better than 47. That's where Tony Daniel kind of kicks ass. So
gets to take more time. Oh yeah, that is a great Spawn. That's a great Spawn.
Yeah, really sick.
Bat and it's just Spawn standing there with his cloak kind of down around his, like splaying out down around his feet, and he's holding out his arm with this big cloud of green, like Spawn's signature green energy, with a bat kind of hovering around. Pretty cool.
Super
Pretty
cool.
good.
Meanwhile, and it's not a bad cover, but it's not my favorite.
Yeah, the Spawn, ironically, I remember that cover pretty well. I might have had that issue, or at least read it at some point before. Sometimes you don't remember every comic you've ever read for your entire life.
Wait, really?
In 40 years or whatever it's been. So, but yeah, I like the colors on it. But
yeah, it's fine.
It's a little more of a generic, like story-centric cover, which sometimes don't stand out as much as the more like strikingly iconic covers. X-Men covers are a good example. There are a lot of X-Men covers that are perfectly competent, but the ones you really remember are the ones that stand alone.
Totally. A big one for me, X-Men number 4, the introduction of Omega Red, that Jim Lee cover with the hand in the foreground. Really, really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, couldn't tell you what 3 and 5 look like, though. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even though maybe I could, if I saw them again, I'd be like, oh, right, it's that one. But
my favorite X-Men cover, and if I tried to bring up the number in my head, it would be wrong, but it's like one of the last issues of the Dark Phoenix saga, and it's like the one where Scott and Jean are like on the blue area of the moon, and they're like up against the wall, and Scott's like blasting, and his costume's all torn up, and Jean's like, it's an awesome cover. Anyway, that's my favorite one. So totally elsewhere in a different universe of another world of a different reality, we're in none other than Bay Ridge, Brooklyn.
Well, wait, I got to do the credits.
Oh, we didn't even do the credits?
Nope.
We did that whole thing and we didn't even do the credits. My God.
It's my fault because I went to start talking about the covers. Anyway, Spawn number 46, Image Comics presents Revenge, Story by Todd McFarlane, pencils by Tony Daniel, inks by Kevin Conrad, copy editor and letters Tom Orzechowski, colors by Todd Broker and Roy Young, dedicated, and this would make more sense for the last arc, to Frank Frazetta.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool.
The Tiffany arc feels like it would have been the one to dedicate to Frank Frazetta a little bit.
Yeah, you could
but
see her as like a Frank Frazetta warrior babe for sure.
That would have been cool if he got to draw.
But I think, as we recall, it was dedicated to, oh gosh, I can't remember exactly which creator, but it was someone who had just passed.
Yeah.
It was one of the Superman creators.
Right.
Joe Shuster,
So,
I think.
This also has a summary, but it says Spawn number 43 summary, which is probably just a mistake. But it is interesting to wonder, like, wait, were these things planned in a totally different order? Was this supposed to come? It is still talking about Tiffany. So, like, I wonder if something else got inserted earlier and maybe this was like old copy.
That's not impossible.
Possible. 3 and 5 are pretty close on a keyboard. It's probably just an accident.
Yeah. Also, God knows how things are being rearranged right now, because going to spoil it for everyone. This is another 2 issues where we don't even hear the whisper of the name Cygor.
Yeah, Cygor's out there.
He's out there somewhere between small town America and big town America. He's making his way to New York for whatever the fuck instinctual. Yeah. Cygor.
Well, I would say he's like making his way downtown.
Oh, that's right. You know,
walking fast.
Yeah, watching to the crowd.
Yeah, well, he would walk 1,000 miles.
That's right. If he could
anyway
see Spawn.
Basically, Vanessa Carlton aside, we're in Bay Ridge, which I don't know that the houses in Bay Ridge actually look like that.
That was going to be the first thing I asked you was, do you think the houses in Bay Ridge look kind of like manor houses?
I'll check
that's
in.
A pretty big house. That looks like Leonardo DiCaprio's house from Wolf of Wall Street.
It does. It looks like a Long Island house for sure.
Yeah.
So I don't love this opening scene. A car is pulling up to this house in Bay Ridge, and I do like this. You know, you're always supposed to sort of like enter a scene late and leave early.
Right.
And this is definitely entering a scene late. There's a family having dinner. We're halfway through their conversation as they are grabbing dinner rolls and spinning spaghetti.
And it's 2 parents of a young child talking about like the goofy newborn to early toddler shit that their kids getting into, like making a mess with their food or something like that. And how funny it was and how they had it on. They got photos and just a typical conversation until the doorbell rings. The husband very hurriedly opens it. He's like, I'll get it. And we see 2 very spy versus spy, sinister looking silhouettes outside the door.
Yep. And we learn that this is Johnny. We're going to learn that it's Johnny Terenzo, but they say that, you know, Mr. Twist wants to have a meeting. Excuse me, Mr. Gravano wants to have a meeting with John. And, you know,
they call him Johnny Pasquale later.
Is that what it is in yours?
They call him Johnny Pasquale at some point.
Oh, I have Johnny Terenzo.
Interesting.
Anyway, look that up. Not a person, so whatever.
Who knows? Perhaps they call him both, and Johnny Pasquale has been as some kind of nickname.
I thought that Johnny Terenzo was just the Italianization of Jack Torrance.
Right.
But whatever.
We'll figure it out. Or we won't, and Spawn's mysteries will remain forever unlocked to us, just as they perpetually seem to do to Al Simmons, and we'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
But,
So John, they flash a gun at him, and he's like, "Okay, I'll go with you. Just don't do whatever you're gonna do in front of the wife and kid." And his wife's like, "Where are you going? When will you be back?" And he's like, "I'm not sure. Don't wait up. Get a good night's sleep."
Yeah, he's like, "Please kiss the baby for me, and you look beautiful." Obviously saying his goodbyes without trying to let them know that's what's happening.
And they put him in the car. They have him in the front seat. He gets a gun put to his head. we get some. I like the blam. I mean, that's fun. Then
The
they,
colors here are interesting, like the very hot red colors when they get, when we see the scene of the murder. Basically, he says, just don't do it in front of my wife and kids. And like, yeah, sure. And they shoot him in the car right there and drop him out right in front of his house.
yeah, and we find out it'll be a full 20 minutes before the neighbors calm the wife's hysterics and stuff. It is a very if you watched a mob movie, if you watched the Scorsese,
Scorsese.
you get it.
He should do a
It's,
Marvel movie, man. Someone should ask him about that.
that's, I think that'd be a good fit.
So, yeah, you're right. This is a very like Goodfellas-esque moment. Like,
Right.
there's even that moment in Goodfellas where the dude's sitting in the front seat and they're just talking to him, and Joe Pesci ice picks him in the back of the head, like in the mid conversation. So, Mob Guy was one of the things that you could like kind of be really excited about and be dangerous with if you were like a white teenager in the mid to late 90s. Like, Mob Guy was one of those identities that like people really like to be like, I have an uncle in the mob, and they'd be like really into mob movies and stuff.
I mean, living in Queens.
It probably, living down south. So I was in that era. I was down here in Georgia. So probably I didn't have anybody in my life that was actually like, I had a lot of people like, hey man, I got an uncle up in New York City and he's in the mafia, like that kind of thing. That was a thing that Southern kids loved too. I guess it, didn't occur to me that it probably would be very different in a place that's practically being depicted in these comics.
So John Gotti was kind of the big one around me,
Right.
and when I was like in high school and stuff. To the point where I played hockey with some kids whose dad went into witness protection because he was John Gotti's getaway driver, and then he
Whoa.
like testified against him. Also, when John Gotti died, there was a very big funeral at Papavera Funeral Home, and I went to high school with the girl whose dad owned that funeral home.
See, that's exactly the kind of stories that people used to make up about themselves when I was in like 1996, where I was. There was always like, oh yeah, my uncle Tony Pepperoni from Queens, New York City. He's real connected up there.
Yeah, the girl whose dad ran the funeral home, she was extremely Italian, but she really loved art.
Wow.
She was like she was all my friends were sort of like the outsider art kids, and then they were like, yeah, I don't know, she's not like us. She doesn't like listen to cool music or whatever, but like she's got her like juicy couture, but she was like cool and like into art. It was like,
Before I moved to Georgia, right before I moved down here when I was a kid, I was about 6 years old, 5. We lived in Natick, Massachusetts, which had at the time, a large Italian American population. I lived across the street from a farm owned by two Italian immigrants with like their family. And one of my friends, I was close friends with their granddaughter, and her grandmother only spoke Italian, and she would call me Georgi, Georgi.
So we get this little execution. We head back to Tony Twist's office afterwards, and we get he's on the phone with somebody on behalf of Mr. Bartino, who is asking for his to have his property returned.
Yeah, he wants
The
his
property
cyborg back.
Yeah, the property in question being overt kill. And I like the little every devil has its master. Tony Twist has just been reminded he's no exception. I really like that shot too, because sort of the way it's laid out and is it's the bottom of that page is a little bit laid out like he's a smaller deal than Jason Wynn.
Right.
It's kind of that same from overhead shot, but everything's a lot closer because he's not as big a deal. I like that. I don't know that was super on purpose, but considering that there happened to just be a lot of office scenes across these comics, it might have just been by osmosis.
Two things I like about these two pages back to back. One thing I don't like, I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. I don't like that the Hitman basically looks like Tony Twist,
They
but
look
with a
exactly the same.
little beard and a
And a
ponytail. He looks
ponytail.
like if Penn Jillette was playing Tony Twist, basically. And so that's the one thing I don't like. The thing I do like is I like the blam and then the slam
Thank you,
echoing
ma'am.
each other in the. What the fuck did you just say to me?
I said thank you, ma'am.
Oh, yes, of course. Black Betty, blam, slam. So
Or David Bowie.
right, yes, blam, yes, I get it. Again,
Sorry. I'm
our
so
different
sorry.
influences, our different areas, the Southern rock and the glam.
Whoa, Black Betty. Blam
Yeah,
and slam.
exactly.
Anyway.
This is going to be a really fun episode. We're just two little Dickens tonight. We both took our little stinker pills.
Yeah.
I guess because it's a Friday. But I like the lettering and the shape of the sound effects blam and slam. It is funny. They echo each other in shape and tone, and it makes it clear that the threat against the guy's like, I want my cyborg back, you motherfucker, or else you blam slam. And it's like clear that like what's happening here is what just happened to this poor schmuck is what's going to happen to Tony Twist,
Yeah.
aka
It's
Vito
cool.
Gravano.
It's like poetry. It rhymes.
That's exactly right. It's you know what it is? It's like hip hop, man. It's language of the streets. That's jazz, baby.
That's jazz, baby. We're finally going to get back to the alley where, last arc we learned about the evil that is festering because of the suit, because of Spawn's suit.
Yeah.
And he threw some worms into a
Some
dumpster.
worms.
And we're going to check in on the worms.
This is going to be a long monologue about the evil that's in the worms.
There is no dialogue. It is all, or there's a little bit of dialogue, but it is all captions about
how
the worms are sin. They are in effect bottled sin.
Because they're absent from God's light because they're always in the dirt.
Right. Okay, I guess.
Sure. We've been through this. Like, this is now the third iteration of this little sequence. It's just in the alley this time instead of on the same stump or whatever from before. The worms are fine. I like that we get on the next page, we get the guy, one of the night people coming down, and he recognizes Spawn. Spawn turns around. We get our first maggot face Spawn here.
I like that it's a combination of maggot face, shoelace face.
Yeah, it's like
we're
in
seeing
that transitional. Yeah. It's pretty good, decent rendering. You wish you could see Greg Capullo's version of that face, and I'm sure we will.
Yeah. And also, I do like the computer coloring on the eyes.
It does look good here. It shows that Spawn's like, he's like fully heightened because his costume is absorbing all the sin from the worms. There's all the sin in the worms. Oh, and he absorbs the like sin from a rat. I don't like that so much because I love rats.
Yeah,
I know that's also probably different for a New Yorker, but like I only saw them here when they were my pets.
The rats don't run this city, we do.
But this is Rat City where they are, and it will say so.
The one thing that kind of threw me about the coloring on this issue all the way through to this point, it's extremely purple.
I don't mind it. It works in some places more than others. It worked better in the like murder and follow-up sequence to me than it does here with Spawn in the alley because it's not quite. It's not bad here. I think
it makes the greens pop, but it makes the reds feel weird. There doesn't feel. This happens whenever we don't have Ole Optics and Steve Oliff and that team. There's usually a little bit more continuity of coloring.
I think in some ways what it is that the word balloons are also that gradient of purple to blue, which they aren't usually. And that blends with the overall bluish purple tone that's been cast in the alley. Now, I don't mind the coloring of the alley here because it also does kind of echo the dark place that he was at before where all the creatures of the night, blah, blah, blah. But I think the lettering, while it stands out just fine on the page, the coloring of the boxes tends to want to merge too much with that blue and purple gradient of the background.
Yeah, it's I think it lends to the art seeming kind of muted overall, and then you're sort of overwhelmed by the amount of text on the page
Right.
because we're missing the white word balloons that just call attention to themselves.
Right.
They just all, like you said, they kind of just blend together.
I like on the page in the panel where we see Spawn's like all the worms crawling in and out of his face. It calls him the master of night crawlers, which again sounds like something someone would have called themselves when I was like 15. Like, yeah, man, they call me the master of night crawlers when I'm in my black belt class.
Yeah, feeds continually now, slowly draining each worm of its dark nectar. Listen, it's
It says what it says.
yeah, I like that Todd's like leaning into that kind of thing. I don't know that he's super great at it, but it's fine. Like, sure, dark nectar, got it. Let's go. I'm in. However, this arc, because of the weird mobsterness of it, it feels like the book is pulling itself in two different directions. One is like, I want grounded street level hero, and then the other is like supernatural evil stuff.
Now, I want to say the interesting thing about that is that it winds up forming a very interesting dichotomy between Spawn and Tremor. And the first part of why starts right here where Cagliostro shows up. We got a quick check in with Wanda and Terry where we see that Terry still has COVID. He goes to bed. Wanda says to go see the doctor. Oh, she also says the hospital wing, the children's wing, is getting funded.
Apparently, it's just been getting funded for 20 issues or whatever at this point, but sure. Great.
But okay, so I guess I was getting a little ahead of myself because Cog shows up before he actually has a conversation with Spawn. But what happens again in this issue, and we'll get to the details of it in a minute, is Spawn has another long conversation with Cog about what it means to be Hellspawn and what his place is and what's going on with him. And Cog's just like, yeah, man, you got to start doing stuff and figuring it out. You've already seen the consequences of taking the wrong actions. What's interesting about that is Tremor winds up being basically doesn't need a cog on his shoulder to try and convince him to do stuff. He's a guy whose life has been taken from him, who's been turned into a monster, whose family has been hidden from him and lied to about him. And he's out there making it happen. He's just fighting his way through these people. It takes him 1.5 issues to get through what Cog is still trying to get Spawn to do. We see that the big assassin from before is named the Orca.
Well, his name is Chris Pronger. Are you aware of Chris Pronger?
No.
Chris Pronger is a Hall of Fame defenseman for the St. Louis Blues.
I'm shocked they didn't change that.
And then later, the Detroit Red Wings. I mean, I guess Chris Pronger doesn't know about Spawn. Chris Pronger, come on the pod. I would love to talk to you about hockey. He's a giant man who is known to be like the hardest hitter in the NHL.
Well, this guy's the hardest hitter in the Mafia. He said they have a bunch of kills, says he's long since lost track of the body count, but it ends here because he's being murdered by someone off screen that we can't see. This happens again in rapid succession to a couple more of these of Mr. Vito Gravano, Dracula Gravano, formerly known the artist formerly known as Tony Twist. They're all being taken out, and then Gravano gets a box full of their heads. And he's saying, so he flies off the handle. He goes, I want him dead. And I'm not talking about tomorrow or next week. I want this son of a bitch gutted tonight. He says, someone started a war. I plan to obliterate his ass. No one touches my boys and lives to tell about it. So,
okay. Cool.
Well, the thing about it is, and I want to take this back to what I was just saying about Spawn versus Tremor. This is the plot of the first 20 issues of Spawn, and it's in like 4 or 5 panels.
Pages. Yeah.
Like just this one spot is in like 4 pages. It shows that you can tell a story like that for a really it just makes that dichotomy of that rapid fire storytelling that can happen when you want a character to be decisive and you don't need them to stick around, versus a character who is extremely conflicted, can't figure out his purpose, and in some ways it feels like his own creator is also trying to do that, trying to nail down exactly what his purpose is. There's been so many masters served over the course of this comic, like you were just saying.
Yeah.
There's the supernatural heaven versus hell side, which gets a lot of page space in this, thanks to like worms are evil, God is good, whatever, and then Cog's pep talk for Spawn, which is coming. And then there's the like street level like mafia movie of it all, where an unseen hitman is like taking out the mafia's guys, sends them the head in a box. Again, it's basically a montage. It's very Goodfellas. I said that earlier,
Yeah.
and in the sense that like there's that, you know, the Layla montage or whatever, where like all the
The
guys are getting hung in meat lockers and stuff.
Yeah, the thing about it is that it still doesn't feel like and we'll get into, but I mean the next scene is Spawn and Cagliostro kind of talking to each other. It does, and it feels a little bit meta in the way that they speak to each other about Spawn's grand purpose
Right.
on this plane of
Oh, we
existence.
do also get an update on Tiffany here, though, where Cagliostro says, "Yeah, you said you saw her bones, but angels don't have bones. They're made out of plasm. I guess they're made out of like
Yeah.
nitroplasm instead
And
of
then
necroplasm or
and then
something."
he's like, she could already be here waiting for you. There's a little bit of this that feels very slapdash. Listen, we've talked about Todd not seeming like much of a planner. And the slowness of the early Spawn issues is really like, okay, I have a little bit of an idea here. I don't have a great way forward, but I have a vague idea. So let me just like draw everything out. I'll check in with every character. I'll, show, Grandma
Well,
Blake for a while or whatever it is. Here, yes, we do get the Tremor stuff in like pretty quick succession. This is the third issue that Tremors showed up in, even. And now it proves that, yeah, we could have done this stuff with Spawn a lot sooner, but it still feels like there's no plan. The plasm thing,
it does feel a lot like, oh shit, what if I need Tiffany to come back, you know?
right, it's like panicking.
Yeah. It occurs to me real quick, we should recap what Tremor's origin actually is, because it was like it was a long time ago that we first met him. He is a guy who
20 issues.
volunteered to be an experimental hitman for the mafia, much like Overt Kill and I think even one other kid, maybe like Cygor, even on some level. That was the military.
Well,
Anyway,
Cygor was,
the military.
that's a
Anyway,
whole.
Tremor is a guy who volunteers to be the next generation of mafia cyber hitman monster warrior, but it doesn't quite work. He's transformed into a monster, but he keeps his mind and his free will. The mafia tries to get him to do what they want by killing his family, and ultimately he goes on the run and vows to take down Vito Gravano once and for all.
Your classic story of Hitman gets experimented on, Hitman can't be controlled once he becomes a monster, and Mafia kills his family, and he goes on a revenge rampage.
Classic Scorsese story.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, I said Goodfellas. That's practically the plot. But
if Tremor went on a cocaine binge driving down the LIE,
hell yeah,
this would be a better comic.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad one. I do like this. So, they're talking about Angela. The worms are doing their thing. We get a lot of close-ups of hands and worms. Lots of worms. So many worms in this issue.
Worms. I like the way, Ani, worms, one of Tony Daniel's strengths. And throughout, there's a lot of dialogue, and Orzechowski is trying to have the most fun he can by like putting the theme text on like plasm, so it's like faded green and like heartbeat, and like doing a lot of those color text that he does.
This is one of the things I was saying earlier is like, I think like Tony Daniel got a little bit of a raw deal in terms of the script of this issue versus the next one, where the action in this issue is a lot of off-panel stuff, and it's a lot of the same stuff over and over again. And then you get these like large swaths of like, I don't know, have Spawn looking cool, and then just like there's going to be a lot of text.
No.
So, Cog gets frustrated with Spawn here and says, for the love of Pete, learn, damn it. You're a Spawn now. As much as you like to be human, that's long gone. People, creatures, things, heaven itself, they're all gunning for you. If one fails, another picks up the slack, but you keep thinking small, ignoring the signs. You're caught in a game, Al, one you can't possibly control. Heaven, hell, they run the show. Us on Earth, we're just the middlemen. And he says, so what's the point? Which, if I'm a Spawn reader at the time, I probably feel similarly because there's not a lot of momentum built into this book.
I think a lot of people are going just for the love of Pete, Spawn, figure your shit out. And
we've joked that a lot of the Wanda and Terry and Cyan scenes feel pulled, straight from Todd's life. This conversation feels a little bit like one of the other Image guys was like, brother, what are we doing? What is this?
Well, and then Cog says the point is to fight for what's right. That's why you're here in the first place, because you fought to return to your wife because that's what you wanted. That's what's right. Which kind of makes Cog sound like he's saying, go back and get back with your wife, though.
Doesn't make any sense.
Because he keeps telling him to move on from that. It's very weird. And, Spawn says, what about all the other things? What about Jason Wynn and the question of whether he is actually responsible for my death? He says, every time I catch my breath, something new is attacking. I'm a man, though you can tell me otherwise. Well, that's all I have left, and if I stop believing that, I swear I'll crack. And Cog says, then don't, and in the meantime, fight. Which, kind of relatable. That sounds like my therapist talking to me in a lot of ways.
Sounds like Spawn is an egg.
Oh.
The way he's talking.
And he kind of is, because his body's transforming, is taking in all these hormones.
In a way, Spawn trans allegory.
Let's go back and redo the other 40 to 45 episodes that we just did.
You know what? It kind of works because he keeps being told that he's something and he keeps saying no. I'm not what you're telling me I am. I was not assigned Hellspawn at birth.
The thing, though, is that every time he tries to self-actualize, he turns into someone he hates. Yeah. So it actually becomes even more true.
Oh, no, boy.
That's dark. R.I.P. No, I love my therapist, and we talk a lot, very often.
I didn't think I was going to be talking about Spawn as a trans allegory ever on this podcast, but we found our way there.
You know what? In the race to 50 issues, we made it, babies. We did it. We finally got this shit to be about our bullshit.
The thing I don't like about Cog here is that he's just like, fight. Just fight all of it. Just fight. Remember, there's a repercussion for every action. You can already see how quickly events can spin out of control. I guess he has. I mean, he got blown out of that, the curse mansion. He's gotten cut up into pieces. He's it can spin out of control, but all that keeps happening is that he ends up back in an alley with mafia guys.
Think about
assholes.
All the times that he tried to help little kids from an abusive father, or he tried to help that shit spins out of control in the span of 20 pages.
In a way, if you're Spawned, why do anything? Because nothing that you do is right.
Again, an allegory for ADHD. Yeah. Let's go back to the whole trans allegory and listen to this, where he's talking about his fucking worms that change his body. And he picks up the worms and he says, you know what these are? These are siphoning evil. And Spawn goes, I need them. And Cog says, yes, you do, but not this way. Not while your uniform is calling the shots. You want to be a man, then open your eyes. We're cracking Al Simmons' egg in real time.
Yep. Thanks for being on this journey with us, listeners.
Gal Simmons up in here.
Well, no, it's trans mask.
That's true. That's fair.
Al Simmons.
That's a good point.
Nope, never mind. I'm not even going to go down the route that I had a terrible. It's been forced Hellspawnization is what's happened.
The Hellspawn of Dorley. Oh boy, there's a deep cut for the Blue Sky listeners if there are any.
Boy.
Anyway, this next scene I hate, We get an early example of canonical bisexual mood lighting here in this
Yeah.
first panel, which the coloring looks great. It is a mafioso. A
So
mafioso. I
purple.
sound like I sound like Mario Puzo. It's this gangster named Vinny.
Oh, you mean writer of Superman?
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Most famously.
Yes, and nothing else. Vinny is in this bed with these two babes, and he says that what they just did is interesting. And they're like, "Is that really the best way to talk about us, like having hot three-way sex?" And he's like, "Well, it's just I've never done anything like this with two of you. You're both great. I about had a heart attack." Then here's where things like that's all whatever. Here's where things take a turn for the wretched. He gets up and he says one of my least favorite things. And I just want this is a canonical George fact. I hate the phrase taking a dump. He says, I gotta take a dump, which I hate. I hate that. It makes anyone who says it immediately look like John Candy to me.
But I love John Candy.
I do too, but I don't want to be talking to him in the middle of like it just I can't there's just something about it that I don't like. Anyway, as she says, how romantic. And then he's like, what's that noise? It sounds like porcelain. I didn't fart that loud, did I?
Tom Warzakowski having a little fun putting some spice on the word fart.
Yeah, and well, anyway.
Which is green. So I don't even want to know what's going on there.
There's this whole scene where we learn that what's happening to these gangsters is that Tremor is finding them and looking for answers about whatever the fuck is going on with his bullshit, trying to get back at Vito Gravano, which he knows where Vito Gravano is. Why doesn't he just go to him? I don't quite get that.
Yeah, I don't love this first.
Well, I guess
Tremor.
actually, no, never mind. What's happening here is that this guy's selling out Vito Gravano's location to him.
Yeah,
That's why.
yeah.
He knew where he was before, and now he's moved. My bad. I'm just updating myself in real time.
What's crazy is that like Tremor like busts through the wall or whatever, and he says, "Make one sound, and I'll skin you where you stand." He just made a lot of noise. Like he just destroyed a bathroom.
Well, I don't think it's that
I guess it got destroyed twice.
Oh, womp womp. We're all trying to find the guy who did this, not JPG. I think it's less that he wants like not anybody to hear what's going on, but more just like don't interrupt me and listen to what the fuck I'm saying.
It's kind of crazy how much, despite all the text on all these pages, despite all the narration, this book moves. It is like kills. Stuff's
having
happening.
2 points of view, like 2 focuses, always makes these books move faster. That's why these 2-parters where it's like Spawn versus Overt Kill, where Overt Kill is doing his shit, it at least moves a lot faster. Don't love this splash page. You know what it is I like it less the further down the page you go, and it's not because of the nude guy on the toilet. It's just because it looks like they started at the top, and I like all the hair on.
And they drew less and less.
Yeah, and they drew less and less, and like it's playing to strengths of Tony Daniels, you know. But by the bottom,
what I don't like? They're cowards.
Yeah,
they didn't show Tremor's hog.
No, they didn't. Well, Tremor doesn't really have one, unfortunately. I think that's why he's mad, because he did not want to be forced tremorized.
Oh no.
We're going to have to delete this whole episode if anyone ever listens to it.
Listen, I have it on good authority that about 40 people listen to our podcast every week.
It's amazing.
So
honestly, that's fucking great. I'm so excited to hear that. The fact that it's even one makes me so excited because I talk to you about this, and all that really matters to me is that we get to talk about some cool comics, and the fact that people want to hear it, you know, and there's a consistent number of them and it's growing. I hope that rules. I love that. Yeah. That's so good. Small audience is still an audience.
Thanks, listeners.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Thank you so much. Share Spawnography with your friends. If they identify with what we're saying in this episode, you know, you can send them.
They should talk to their therapist.
Yeah, exactly right.
I like Tremor. So as much as I don't like that splash page, I like the next Tremor, the next 2 Tremors that we see on the next page, where he confronts Tony Twist / Vito Gravano. We get to the one of our possible quotes for the beginning of the issue.
Oh yeah, a little behind the scenes tidbit. We pick those quotes, and sometimes we pick from a couple of them. How
Yeah.
about that?
It's really riveting radio
Going
right now.
0 out of 40 users found this trivium useful.
Yeah. And I really like on the next page when he's sort of monologuing at Gravano, and Gravano tells him like, "Hey, actually, your brother's alive. I didn't kill him, but so if anything happens to me, like,
they're gonna kill your brother.
They're gonna kill him."
And that's the last connection he has to his humanity, which he thinks is totally lost at this point. He says so. All my family's dead.
In a weird way, is Tremor? Do we sort of care about Tremor? Not more than Al, but is he, because he's more quickly set up? Are we just kind of on board with him in a way that Spawn's like a little harder to crack?
Well, we feels like we keep being asked to get on board with Spawn over and over.
And Spawn's not on board with Spawn.
Right.
So,
which, you know, that's part of the story, is the conflict of like, I mean, I get it. That's not a blanket criticism of the concept. But yeah, no, I think it's one of those things where we're getting a little bit of a whole story here. Honestly, Tremor's plot here, going after Vito Gravano, is essentially what was drawn into 3 issues of the Violator Limited series. So,
true.
You know, it moves a little faster because we've seen this story told in a longer amount of time, and we've also seen it drawn out over and over again with Spawn. Again, it's that dichotomy between Al Simmons as a guy who can't figure out what he wants, can't figure out what to do, can't figure out how to live with the consequences of his actions, or even better, take actions that have consequences he can live with.
Right.
And then you have Tremor, who's like, I don't fucking care. They may be a monster. I'm a monster. I'm going to go monster them. Which in some ways, again, very relatable content. There's a lot of trauma in that, I think.
I think also, though, that like because Vito Gravano has a direct connection to Tremor, that all just feels more enmeshed. We don't get such a direct... Spawn's just been giving people files about Jason Wynn. He never just goes and hunts down Jason Wynn, a thing he could do.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
And I like, you know, he confronts Vito. He doesn't kill him because of the brother, and he leaves. He brings Vinny.
Yeah, I love this. He rips
hilarious.
He's got Vinny chained to a pillar in
naked
his house, in Gravano's house, and he just grabs a whole pillar and carries it off as Vinny's going, oh god, oh god, oh god.
But we get an understanding of like what Gravano's thinking, where they say like, boss, why'd you let him go? And he's like, because, gentlemen, we prepare for his return. We need him back in one piece. Overt Kill, we know, is gone.
Yeah.
And the plan is to give Sicily Tremor, but without any human brain. So they are planning something more for...
They want to replace the lost Overkill with Tremor, basically.
Yeah. And then...
Because otherwise, Vito Gravano is going to be bam, slam, thank you, ma'am.
But yeah, I mean, and that's going to lead Tremor back to the alley. I like this shot of Spawn with the cape kind of behind him. That's cool. Mm-hmm. But he needs to team up with his friend, because they're friends, kind of. They're as close to friends as you could possibly get, I guess.
He's the only guy. He's another like monster guy who Tremor is like, well, we came to an understanding before. I know he gets what this is about for me, and it's kind of his stakes too, so I'll take it. Yeah, and he shows up and he says, you know, Spawn, I need help, yours. And Spawn's like, where do you get off? And Tremor is like, quiet. And he says, Vito's my problem, I know, but I thought you'd be interested in hearing a few names from Vinny here. He's a fountain of knowledge. What were those names again, Vinny? And what does he say? Wanda Blake, Terry Fitzgerald, Cyan Fitzgerald, Jason Wynn. And Tremor's just like, so what do you say now? And that's the end of Spawn issue 46, ending on the cliffhanger of the team up between Spawn and Tremor.
It's going to lead us right to Spawn number 47. Image Comics presents Twisted.
Oh, hell yeah.
Story by Todd McFarlane. Pencils by Greg Capullo. Inks by Todd McFarlane and Danny Meeke. Copy editor and letters by Tom Orzechowski. Colors by Brian Haberlin and Dan Kemp. So we're still no Oleoptics
We might be
on
in
this.
the post-Oleoptics era at this point.
Yeah. And this one is dedicated to Dick Giordano.
Oh, okay. Great artist.
So
Classic artist
as
of the
soon as
Silver and Bronze Age.
as soon as we get into this, though, it's just I'm like, oh, we're so back. Greg's back. Let's go. You know? Again, not that Tony Daniel did a bad job, but also I have the newsprint copy of 47 and I have the direct market copy of 46. The difference between these, for anybody that doesn't know, the direct market copy has glossy pages. The newsprint copy has it's actually kind of funny. The cover has a barcode that blocks out the art credit a little bit, the signature, which is just an accident.
Yeah, it happens.
The barcode doesn't exist on the direct market ones on the cover. I believe, actually, it's not even on the back, but it gives this like nice, like faded out effect to all the coloring and all the pages. I love comics printed on newsprint. I think it's the way that comics should be printed.
I love newsprint comics.
It just works.
I think part of the problem with something that I think keeps people from fully connecting a lot with Silver Age comics read through like digital apps, which are still a great resource, I think, a lot of the time for people.
Recolors are terrible.
The flat coloring doesn't look right on just a plain white background. It's not accounted for the fact that it would have been on an off-white, like they
might have yellowed.
A more conceptual version of recoloring would look cool. I get why they don't, because it changes the art, whatever, but you know, it also changes the art to just present it that way.
Question for you. Do you like when comics are trying to do the throwback thing and so they, in the coloring, like yellow the pages to sort of...
Sometimes. I think it depends how successful it is and what comic it is. I've read comics that do that, or seen even like covers and pieces of art that do that. Yeah. That looks really good. And I've seen times where it looks kind of second rate or bad, and you know.
I hear you. The most egregious recoloring job I've ever seen, and I hope one day that Marvel fixes this, is the Walt Simonson Thor omnibus. It is. I love that run, and the recoloring is.
That's a shame.
It's a sin. Honestly, it like whoever got put in charge of that, and I'm not saying that the artists who were tasked with it are at fault, because I think it's a bit of a like, hey, you just have to update this. But like, boy, oh boy, the fact I could go on a whole rant about recoloring old comics. Anyway, that's not what this podcast is about. I don't even know that much about coloring. I just know when it looks good and when it looks bad.
Well, that's being a critic, I guess.
That's true.
Not always. I will say the Spawn Omnibuy do not, as far as I know, go back and change the colors. There may be one or two instances we found where there's differences in the color, and it might be for clarity more than anything.
100%.
But for the most part, I would say 99% of this seems to be exactly as appears on the pages. And that's also a great value because it allows us to read it and see it as readers would have seen it, at least in the ones with glossy pages, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Love this opening. It's really, really cool. I love these weird rats. I just, man, I'm so in. I'm so here for this.
It is a very big difference in that big shadow of Tremor, like forming the background behind some of the panels, and the narration works really well in tandem with the lettering. This whole thing looks great. What we're seeing is that the guy who gave the names of the people that Vito Gravano was spying on didn't know that much. And so Spawn told Tremor, I'll help you if you get me more information about this. Tremor finds out what guy he needs to go get next. He goes and gets the guy, and he brings it back. And we get this double-page spread of Tremor being like, look, jerk, He calls him a smartass. He says, listen, smartass, the mafia has an army of grunts that'll clog these alleys so tight you won't have a chance to breathe. That's not counting what I'm planning on doing to you. So you're going to help me or what? And basically he's telling him, like, I found the guy who has all the answers. Are you going to help me or what's going to happen here? And we get to our actual quote that we use, the little back and forth here, where Tremor says, I didn't know this was going to turn into some goddamn ordeal. There isn't time for that.
Would listen to a Spawn and Tremor hosted podcast where they just complain about the mafia.
I was going to say, I mean, in a way, that's almost what we're doing here.
It's a good point. You are the voice of Spawn, and I am the voice of Tremor now. So,
and we are the voice of a generation.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Spawn's like, well, we'll have to find some time then. He starts interrogating the guy, and he tells him everything he knows, that he wanted him to watch this family, that for a while Vito Gravano thought Terry Fitzgerald was Spawn, but even though now he knows he's not, there's still someone following him because they know they're connected.
There's a real thoughtfulness to Capullo's layouts. There's so much more black on these pages.
Yes, that makes a huge difference. Well, and it's also more thoughtfully used.
That's what I mean. Like that, you called out that shadow of Tremor being a place where it's like, oh, Orzechowski's like, oh, I don't need word balloons, or I don't need, like, I could just throw text on there. Whereas he is forced to use so many caption boxes because he needs to pull those words out from the background a little bit. There's also just, instead of there being this sort of like wash, and this is the difference in coloring, the colorists, Haberlin doesn't allow these pages to be like washed with one color. I will say they're kind of orangish, but that's immediately counterpointed by blue.
Yeah, so there's very, like, those contrasting colors.
There's a great amount of balance.
The thing is, there's a lot of big areas of black on Tony Daniel's pages too. The difference is, in Tony Daniel's pages, he usually leaves Tremor up front and bathed in shadow. And so in a lot of cases, what's happening is, and it's not true in all the pages, but in many of the pages, many of Tony Daniel's pages, there's a big area of black as the focal point and a big open background around it, which is in many ways almost more of a like Mike Mignola kind of structuring. True. But in the Greg Capullo pages, you can contrast it directly where he's got a lot more shadows, like in the background and foreground framing stuff, like that Tremor shadow on the page. And it's also true that he, in the double page splash, he's got a big area of black up front for Tremor and then the more open background. But even there, he's contrasting it with the depth of having those areas of spotted black in the background and creating layers in the foreground that gives it more depth than what Tony Daniel and Kevin Conrad accomplish in their pages.
100%. And I think that the script, we can't really speak to whether or not the script allowed for a double page spread, or if that was like a Capullo, like, oh, I could do this as like one page.
Yeah.
And that would be, or one, image, and that would be really cool. This is a way more effective splash of Tremor that really gets across his size than the one that we get from Tony Daniel.
Well, because when he has that big black frame, it has more impact because we haven't been seeing it for panel after panel after panel. Right. Some of that also is that it's at the beginning of the story, so we haven't seen Greg Capullo pull that off a bunch of times yet. And he will do more of it. But before that, Spawn basically interrogates the guy, agrees to help Tremor. He says he'll protect him from Jason Wynn so he can get his brother. From Vito Gravano so we can get his brother. Then we check in with Jason Wynn where he's getting confronted by Clown. Now here's another scene that I hate. I don't hate, I actually like the way it finally lays out more of the actual intents and consequences between Jason Wynn and Clown, where Clown is like, look, what I need you to do is bully Spawn and harangue him into slipping up and using a bunch of his power or letting his costume fully take over, because once it fully evolves, he goes back to hell, and I get to go back to proving that I'm the one who should be in charge of Hell's armies and not this stupid Al Simmons, none of these Hellspawn, because demons are better than humans, and Malbolgia thinks humans are smarter.
And this also sets up another great, just like we found out that Gravano has his own masters, we're seeing a similar kind of dichotomy between Jason Wynn and Clown here too, right? So we're seeing kind of characters paired off together
Yeah,
in sort of similar ways where we're like
right.
building to consequences, we hope.
Right, and we're having people nudge these different forces. These different forces are being nudged closer together. Now, what I hate about this scene is I hate that Clown jokes about Chief Banks. I hate the things,
Yeah.
the way he says it. It's just crass. I get that it's like 2024 eyes and my sensitivity and my fifis or whatever. It's all fine. I understand that Clown's a mean character and he's evil and he's disgusting and he's from hell. He's a demon.
This feels like the scene that John Leguizamo most
Yes,
was inspired by.
because it kind of goes real dark and real edgy. And then he's also, Clown is also picking on the black limo driver. They're in a limo. He's like flicking his ear and he calls him what I would consider a racial slur that I'm not even going to repeat or explain the context of. And the whole time he's going like, he's joking and he's going, ha, ooh, I think I'm going to fart. More farts and sharts and shits and fits and giggles. And it's like, okay.
It's a lot. It's super juvenile.
I know it's Clown. I know he's gross. I know he's weird. But it's starting to be a lot, especially with the previous scene where it was like a whole like toilet gag thing.
Yeah. We haven't gotten a lot of Clown recently, so whenever he comes back, it feels like a shock to the system, but it also does feel like this is where Todd gets to like get this out of his system.
Yeah.
As well, right? Like we got a fart two issues in a row with fart jokes is like
it's a lot.
A lot.
I mean, and I'm not immune to a fart joke. It's just like a guy going, "Oh, I'm gonna fart," is like not funny. That's like the lowest form of a joke. There are things I like in this conversation. I like where Jason Wynn says, "My biggest problem hasn't been believing you have the capabilities, but knowing when to actually take you seriously." I like that because it kind of points out the problem with Clown's whole shtick is that it's impossible to take him seriously when he's going, "Oh, I'm gonna fart."
Yeah. I do think that it just sort of takes the, I don't know. It's so distracting. It just takes me out of what was going on. I was like, I'm invested in Spawn and Tremor at this point, and then Clown comes in. There's one like funny joke though, like legitimately funny joke, and it's the sort of like closing joke. Did you catch it?
When he says, "First time in a limo, Dr. Galakowitz."
Yeah.
I don't get it.
So that's a reference to a Bud Light commercial.
Oh, that I just don't remember.
From around the time where it's a guy like drinking a Bud Light on a like, and he gets picked up at an airport, and there's a guy and he follows like the guy that says,
"Oh," when he gets in the limo and he's like chugging the Bud Light.
Yeah, and he's like, "First time in the limo, Dr. Galakowitz."
So it's basically the level of humor is if Clown was just going, "What's up?"
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
A couple years later, that's what it will be.
Right.
But this places this very firmly in like 1990, whatever.
Now, two things I want to say as we transition these scenes. Violator Clown says to Jason Wynn that he hates the Hellspawn because Malbolgia believes in the ability of the humans to lead his armies more than his own children. Okay? As we transition to the next scene where Cog is returning to the alley to look for Spawn, he says he finds Spawn all boarded up, covered in junk. He says he's regressing and building a barricade so his costume can evolve. And Cog says, "Damn you, Malbolgia, how many children do you need for your accursed war?" And I like that parallel that we're getting the premise that Violator doesn't see this as Hell's children, Hellspawn as the children of Malbolgia, but everyone else does. It's the same thing to the
Right.
armies of heaven and everyone else. They're both creatures of hell. Now, the other thing I want to point out, he says, there's a little bit here where they say it's Rat City is what they call it. No one wants to be caught here. And somewhere in here, I think it's here, but there might be another spot. There's a bit where they explain where better to send Spawn, who feeds on these worms and these creatures, than to the very filth that lays here. Well, the thing is, though, there was just a whole monologue at the beginning that says worms are in the dirt of the earth, and that's where they're farthest from God's light. Why would you not send him to where there's dirt and not paved streets?
Well, it's a concrete jungle, George.
Where dreams are made of, and nightmares too, apparently.
Wet dream tomato.
That's right. That's right. Something else that occurred to me last time I was in the city about a month ago visiting you and our dear friends. Not a lot of alleys in Manhattan.
No.
Not a lot of space for a rat city. Maybe in the Lower East Side, there's a few.
Other cities, more alleys.
Other parts of New York, more alleys.
Yeah. I mean, I have an alleyway behind my house in Queens.
Right.
But Manhattan itself, I do think that is a function of development over time. You're right. Like Lower East Side, down at the Bowery, you'll get a couple alleys. So
it's not totally, but he's in one of the few alleys in Manhattan. So maybe the times when they've been like he's in that alley, it's been more easy to figure out which one because there's only so many. The
other thing too is if he's sent to Rat City and it's this place where evil festers, right? I kind of don't love that implication about the night people.
Well, it says that this alley, this filth-laden alley, exists in an area even the homeless, and I hate calling them that necessarily, but even the night people fear to tread.
But
so
we know that's not really true.
Well, they're getting there at this point. Like, we haven't seen them hang out with Spawn in some time.
That's
and
true.
Every time they do go in there, they're like, oh my God, because Spawn's got fucking worms crawling out of his face. So it's reaching the point where, like, as this evil is building, those people aren't coming here. There is a level of separation. And also we see that the worms are, like, eating the guy that Spawn and Tremor, like, interrogated at this point. So we move on to
Twist's compound.
Yeah, Vito Gravano. It's a little past 11. And he's talking to someone. And he's explaining that they've got the whole place, armed guards everywhere. They'll know exactly when Tremor shows up. There's no way he can get in. But there's one place he didn't account for.
Which is where the worms go. Goes underground.
That's right.
And I like these pages. They're fun. He comes out of the ground. He starts fighting. And
that panel of him busting out of the ground, he looks great.
Pretty cool. He's busting shit up. He's angry at Gravano. You took my family from me. I'll do the same for you. I know where your ex-wife lives, blah, blah, blah. He gets shot by John Turturro.
Who's holding a big-ass hand cannon gun.
Yeah.
So we get the impression that he can get shot, but it takes a big caliber weapon. And it is John Turturro. And John Turturro is like, well, Tremor recognizes him. And he's like, wait a minute, David, my brother? And here's where things get interesting for Tremor, much like they got interesting for Spawn. It's a similar development where now Tremor has to question if what things he thinks about himself are true. Because David says that he believes Tremor is the monster that killed his brother.
Right.
That he saw the body and that he can't be the monster. Bleh, the monster can't be David's brother.
Right.
And it's much like Spawn, like seeing his own body in the grave. And, there's a parallel there that I think I want to give credit to Todd McFarlane. I think is being drawn on purpose.
I need to give credit to Capullo, McFarlane, and Danny Miki for the cartooning. As soon as he recognizes his brother, Tremor really takes on a different tone, not just in his dialogue,
right,
but his face shape changes.
Yeah.
Just
Before he
really
was a little like bulldoggy, and now he's very like
vulnerable and raw, and just you really,
That
it's crazy.
sad Tremor
I
in the
know.
corner there. He looks like what's the big monster, Ludo from Labyrinth.
He really does, actually. This is a total monstrous version of Ludo. I didn't even put
Smell
two and two together.
bad. Great movie, Labyrinth.
And we even get a close up of the eyes on the next page where he's like, "Please, I thought you were dead after they killed Anna Marie and the baby. I thought they wiped out everybody. How did you escape?" And
The guy's pumping him full of lead the whole time.
yeah, just blam, 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 blam. Another more fun Tom Orzechowski. It's almost like Orzechowski got to have fun in this issue after the last issue where he had to like.
Well, also,
Just
it's honestly
really
like
get
Greg
through.
Capullo got to draw all the action in this fucking story.
Yeah.
Um,
Love
and
the introduction of Spawn, though.
David is starting to look more like Dennis Farina in this bottom left
He
panel
does
here.
start to look like Dennis Farina. He starts out John Turturro. He becomes with a mustache, and then he becomes Dennis Farina.
And the whole time, man, I really do love that cartooning from Capullo of like the way fucking Tremor's face just melts.
Yeah.
He looks like Kermit the Frog, to go back to Muppets.
Yeah.
He looks like, bleh. It's so sad. And he's pleading. He says, "David, please, it's me, Richard." And he says, "My brother's dead." And he keeps shooting him. Meanwhile, outside, Spawn is kicking the ass of all the guards. I wish we got to see that sequence a little more. We get a little bit of it, but it would be awesome to see Spawn tear through a bunch of guards at this point, because I don't think we've actually gotten to see something like that.
Yeah,
we've seen him fight a few people,
haven't.
but not like a whole big like horror movie version of Spawn ripping ripping through people and shit.
You know how we frequently get like Nightwing we'll get like a double page spread of Nightwing like flipping through stuff and like fighting guys like through a building or whatever, and that's a little bit of a trope. Would love a Spawn double page spread that's like him just like kicking ass through different, like the Raid.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
This
little splash
sick.
panel of him.
The splash panel.
But also the
good.
splash page. I love the panel. I love that Greg Capullo has started doing Batwing's cape Spawn.
Yep.
And this splash page, yes, the follow-up of the full shot of Spawn with his chains raging. And it says, "Tonight they'll be taught the first lesson of the Hellspawn. You can't kill what's already dead." Talking about the
Honestly,
guards.
we could have used that for the beginning of the episode too. You can't podcast what's already dead.
That's true.
Although
there's so many options.
I guess.
We do.
But I like also that like Tremor has given in. When we catch back up with Tremor, like he's given in and he's just like, "David, like don't do this." Like his brother has shot the hell out of him.
That confidence he had in his mission has been shattered.
And then Greg Capullo, Spawn shows up. He says, "I wouldn't say that. Drop the gun."
That gun that he draws.
That gun is fucking. No gun has ever looked like that.
He says, "I said drop the gun," and it's this like sci-fi looking like that looks like an AR like 99. It's like an AR 123. It's
that
like
gun looks like it went into the fly chamber.
Yeah, it does. It looks like a fucking Predator's gun or something. It's huge, and he's pointing it right at David's chest.
And we don't even realize how big it is until like that forced perspective shot. You're like, "Oh, big gun," but where the camera's really close to the gun. No. It's like as big as a man.
Sniper rifle, like a fucking massive gun. So they pull back, and Spawn's holding it with one hand. Love this whole page. Spawn's face throughout this is incredible. The first panel where his face is in the top right, he's got that really determined look, and he's like, "Do us both a favor, Vito. Shut up. I'm making the rules now." And he's like basically telling him, "Leave Wanda and her family alone, or it's going to be a big fucking mistake for you." And he's like, "I warned you, leave them alone." And Gravano says, "I don't know what you're talking about." That panel where he says, "I warned you, Vito. Obviously, I didn't make myself clear enough. When I said leave me alone, that included those around me." Spawn looks absolutely maniacal there. Like he's practically got a gleeful grin on his face at this point. Gravano says he doesn't know what he's talking about. Spawn snaps David's arm.
Incredible panel. I like that Capullo decided to get in on the lettering there.
Yeah, it's like a close-up of David's face in the lettering of the snap.
Yeah.
That's great. And now it's like Spawn ice cold in those colors, all in gray at the bottom. And he's like, "You're not listening." And Gravano says, "You don't scare me, freak." And he says, "Then you're a stupid man, Gravano." And he
And then we
says,
get a file.
"I was about to say, just when you thought there was not going to be any files in this two-parter, right in the home stretch, here we come with a file." And this one's on disc. We're upgrading our files now. Where Spawn got a computer, how he knows what's on the disc, only God in hell knows. He says, I know things about you. You don't want your Sicilian cousins ever to find out. I'm assuming it's the connections between him and Billy Kincaid and the police.
Yeah, it's all the sort of plot machinations that have been building over time, and it's fine. More files. This one's a computer file, seemingly, though, so
Yeah.
at least it's a little bit different than what we're used to. This
Like
one
I
seems
said,
to
it's
be
a bit of an upgrade. Tremor's laying on the floor dying there. While he's saying that, Gravano is like, "I'm not going to tell you shit. I'm not going to do shit for you." Spawn says, "Well, I'm going to have to take it out of your man here," and picks up none other than David, Tremor's brother, and starts just brutalizing him. And Tremor's like, "Please stop it." And then, as the costume's about to lash out at Tremor, he goes, "I said stop. That's my brother, damn you. You said you'd help me find him, not kill him." And here's where Spawn goes fucking hardcore.
dark as hell.
Here's where we see world famous murderer Al Simmons come out. He goes, "Wrong. I said I'd protect you from Vito and his men. When I see someone standing over a bloody body, it's pretty easy to determine who the bad guy is. So I am keeping my end of the bargain." And then he blasts fucking David's leg, blows it off. It's like a RoboCop level of violence.
Yeah.
And the thing is, about that is, Spawn is the one standing over a bloody body here. He's the one who came in.
It's a good bit, like, of writing and art kind of coming together there. And,
he says
basically
he'll live
says,
if
like,
you get him to a hospital.
Right. But now it does feel like Spawn's made another enemy, right? Tremor's not super happy about this.
Yeah. No, he's like, "I'll kill you." And Spawn says, "No, we don't have time if you want to save your brother." And basically, he says, Gravano's like, "When you leave here, you'll be dead before you get 10 feet. I've got an army out there." And here's where we get to see what happened to all the guys who fucked with Spawn.
Yeah, I do like this.
Because Spawn goes, "Save your breath, fat boy. No one can hear you. Go look." Again, with the body shaming, they're always taking a chance to be like, he's a fat guy. Don't love that. But he says, "Take a look. And Vito, don't get too comfortable. I'll be back soon. You and I are far from through." And as he says that, we see Vito Gravano looking outside, where these dudes have just been torn apart and their mangled bodies laid in a giant pile. The one dude's like eating the curb. There's bullet shells everywhere. Like, it's hardcore.
Yeah,
I
for
do
real.
wish we could have seen that fight, but I also like the punchline of it being like, Spawn just Al
turn
Simmons
these
is
guys
like,
into pretzels.
"I'm going to fucking send a lot of guys to Mel Bulge's army tonight," basically. And that's where we end.
Yeah. It's weird because we don't end on sort of like we definitely know the way forward, which is how Spawn tends to give us like a little hint towards what's next, or they do like a coming up next. Like,
Well, remember
blah, blah,
last
blah.
issue? Last issue, there was like ending after ending after ending where it
True.
checked in with every aspect. So we don't get that here. It did what we wanted it to do last arc and ends on the fucking like the mic drop.
True. But usually we even get like a next time Armageddon or whatever in like
Right.
a little, and we don't even get that.
No.
This feels like, oh shit. Like,
This is-
and I think it's because it really wants you to sit with Al in that last scene. This is a different Spawn.
He's doing an apocalyptic level of violence here.
Yeah.
Though again, we haven't seen Spawn do this before. We've seen him fight people, we've seen him like be brutal to people, but we haven't seen him fight through like a whole army of guys trying to blow him away. and we technically didn't see the fight here, but we see what happens as a result. And this is while he's at war with himself and with his costume and everything. He's not even at the height of his powers. This is the Al Simmons of it all coming through. And that is what's so dark about it, because he's just blowing guys away, ripping them apart. He's not like magicking them. He's using his like fighting skills, and he's using the costume too, and the instincts of the costume, but he's leaning into that and letting that world famous trained killer come out. And it's chilling.
Yeah. This is where the horror elements are really taking hold, and that's been part of the whole evil lurking subplot that's been building. But yeah, I think it's pretty effective, and I think it's kind of fun because it's a little. You kind of have to sit up straight when you read it and be like, "Oh shit!"
It's that horror movie
Simmons
Spawn, like you said, coming out again. And this time Al Simmons is the monster in it. Like, unequivocally, Tremor at no point is like what we would consider in Spawn's terms a bad guy. He's going after Vito Gravano, a guy we know and consider as a villain, and he's like trying to get his brother back. He's motivated by similar things as Al Simmons, but when it gets down to it, he don't got that dog in him. Al Simmons doesn't care
especially
about
now.
Once Wanda and like Cyan and Terry are on the line, he's like, no, it's over. I don't care who I have to get through, who I have to blast away, who I have to blast apart, which enemies I have to make, who I have to alienate.
Which enemies that are technically related to my friends.
Exactly. How many allies I have to turn into enemies. He's just a driven force of nature here. And I think it's interesting to see that, because it's just what Cog was telling him. He's like, you've got to latch on to the thing that matters to you and do what's right for that. And in a way, Al Simmons is doing his version of that, which is killing to protect it, which is what landed him in hell.
Yeah, 100%. And also, this puts us in a really exciting place. We're only 3 issues away from 50.
Going to be a big moment for the podcast, too, and a big moment for us as readers, because, I mean, well, seriously, I'll be at the end of the first volume of the compendium. That's true. What, an episode or two away, and we'll be moving on to volume 2. So if you've been reading along, or if you're looking to read along, that's a good touchstone for where these volumes are. They're about 50 issues each, and they're just the main Spawn series. So when you've heard us cover other things, we've been covering those from original hard copies, like the original issues that we got from eBay.
Yeah, Angela and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have a 2-parter for next episode, and then the episode after that is issue 50 alone, because it is a double-sized issue. So
there you go. 2
pretty
issues.
Exciting.
2 episodes and 3 issues left, and we'll be done with the first trade. I would say that feels like a milestone to have covered 50 issues of Spawn. I mean,
we're 7th of the way through.
And I'll save my thoughts on how that feels till we get to issue 50. But I think it's pretty cool. And for those of you who have been with us and who are sticking with listening to us, thank you for being here again. I don't care if it's 40,000, 40 million. The fact that you're
4,
honestly, if it was 4, I'd still be happy with that. I would always, I'm always happy to see it grow, but I'm overjoyed that, we've come this far. We've managed to get this deep into Spawn, and honestly, I'm having a blast. So we'll get more into this as we hit issue 50. But yeah, it just feels great to be. As much as I'm sure it felt cool for Todd McFarlane to be in that stretch, it feels cool for us to be in that kind of rush to Spawn number 50 now as well.
Totally. We do have a little bit of back matter. I have both of these issues in hard copy. So 46 first. So the first one is just about asking Todd how he does the 3D sculpting for his figures, which is kind of cool. He does not answer that.
Okay.
But Jerry Culva from Fletcher, Vermont asks a couple of questions. Will you ever put Spawn on Sega Genesis? How about James Earl Jones playing the voice of Spawn in your movie? Just gruff up his voice a little bit. Do you still have a lot of plans for your action figures in the future? If so, would you share some of your ideas? And what's up with the double face on the Spawn 2 figure? In parentheses, could be better.
I don't remember the Spawn 2 figure.
So the Spawn 2 figure has a normal Spawn head and then it has a like the mask is being ripped away head.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So Todd says there are no plans at present of Spawn appearing in any more 16-bit games. At this point, the Super Nintendo one had come out. But you can look for a Spawn game on Sony PlayStation later this year. No plans currently for James Earl Jones, but along those lines, the voice of Keith David, who starred in Dead Presidents, is doing the voice of Spawn for the HBO show.
Hell yeah,
he has that real deep, bass-sounding voice. I've got lots of plans for Spawn in the future in terms of action figures. In the future that we know now,
he's got a whole toy empire. And also Keith David, one of the best to ever do it. Just want to say.
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah, Spawn 2, that's right. It was kind of like a Peter Parker face where it's like it's half of his zombie face is exposed and the other half has the mask. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he says, I own a toy company and therefore have to keep making toys on a fairly regular basis. Your question as to why the Spawn 2 figure has two looks, I just wanted to do a half and half face as though the mask was coming off.
Yeah.
Somebody from England is upset about Viking Spawn.
Okay.
He says, I have to pay 15 to 30 pounds for each toy and resent paying for this crap just so my collection is complete. How about producing the Admonisher, the Gremlin Assistants from the recent Curse story, Pit, Mr. Gone, Cyberforce, Violator Brothers, aka the Fleabiac Brothers.
Right.
The list is endless. 90% of your toys.
Spawn. He had like a helmet.
90% of your toys are excellent. Why not make it 100% like the comic? You know you can do better. Todd says, I understand your criticism. I was using the Viking Batman as more of a generic term. I had seen it, and they still had the same Batman with the same mask and cape. They just stuck a couple extra things on him, called him Viking Batman. Our Viking Spawn is a completely new character you'll be seeing in the future. Do we ever get to see? Is that Dark Ages Spawn?
At some point. No. Viking Spawn just looks like a Viking. He just doesn't have much spawn to him. His body is kind of exposed. He's got a lot of fur. It's a cool looking figure. It just doesn't really, it's not like what you'd necessarily think of when you think of a Spawn variant.
Fair. I mean, it's still the early days, so.
They're figuring it out.
They're figuring it out. I see what you did there.
Yep.
The next one is really funny. It says, it's from a 9-year-old from Vienna, Virginia, named Malcolm Jones, who I guess now is like 30-something.
Okay. Probably a listener.
Dear Mr. McFarlane, my name is Malcolm Jones, and I love Spawn. I have some questions. Why did you make Spawn an African superhero? Also, thank you. Is there ever going to be another Spawn to help the original? When is your Spawn movie coming out? I read it in blah, blah, blah 25. Is there ever going to be a game on Sega Genesis? Is Vertebreaker going to be in any miniseries? Is Angela ever going to be in another miniseries? My babysitter said you're nasty, ugly, deadly, but I think you're cool. Alan Moore is cool. Greg Capullo is cool. All your staff is cool. That is all. Stay cool. Malcolm Jones.
So Vertebreaker was like a lost Phoebeac brother, sort of.
Yeah. So he says, Dear Malcolm, thanks for not being persuaded too heavily by your babysitter, because whether she wants to accept it or not, it's really quite simple. It's not being aimed at her. I decided to make Spawn African American because I think that there are certain subtleties that can be played off of the racism themes. Again, with my experience, I learned from living with Al Simmons, a real African American man who the character is based on. That'll not get him in trouble, but they are not friends today. That there are some subtle differences in our society. It is unfortunate a little bit, but it is also like that. Todd is also saying, like, I had a black friend and I learned that the world is different for him, but also I guess that's good.
I mean, in a way, it's positive. This is the mid-90s, and I'm going to go ahead and say I don't recall a lot of white people saying, like, I learned from my black friends that they experience things differently from me.
That's a good point.
That's not something I was hearing from a lot of white people, and I think it's important because it's true. The elegance with which he's saying it notwithstanding,
yeah,
you know, I don't think it's a bad sentiment. And I'm not going to try and analyze this kid, but I get the impression, the way he says thank you, that maybe he's also black. And, you know, maybe that's a good reason why you make characters that reflect different kinds of
representation matters. This is the whole point, right? This is all we're ever talking about. Todd continues. Given that we have a white man and a black man who come from the exact same background and live the exact same life, he is treated differently. There is still some prejudice towards him, and I don't ever foresee another Spawn helping this 1990s version on any regular basis. That's funny, considering that now there's a whole team book. But there might be some crossovers or time warp storylines where we interact with others, such as Wildcats. Spawn Wildcats would have already come out at this point. Or, sorry, Spawn Wildcats is coming out about the same time as this, but in the timeline of Spawn happened about 10 issues ago.
Spawn Wildcats rules.
We'll cover it. Just got to get a guest for it. I'm working on it. Spawn is like Batman. He's basically a loner. Current plans call for the Spawn movie to come out in summer 1997. I'll let you know as soon as I can of any exact dates. Both Vertebreaker and Angel will be appearing in the future. But unfortunately, because I don't do that many books, it takes a long time for each of these characters to make the rounds. The next one, maybe you can help me with this one. It says, Dear Todd, is that a bunch of Izzy's helping the curse?
Oh, okay.
What is that?
Izzy. This was published in 1996, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wait. No. Spell it.
Iszes.
Okay. Those are from Jesus. No. Oh my God. I want to say they're the little creatures from like the Max or something.
Is it?
Or something like that. That's the only thing I can think. I feel like that might be the thing.
You're right. It is from the Max.
Yeah. Izzy's.
Yeah. Izzy's. The corrupted creatures from the Max. So that I didn't even think of when we covered that. But
They could be.
This guy says, whatever the creatures are, I hope you have them appear again. They're a nice addition to this book and the Spawn mythos. I also enjoy the continuing saga of Cygor, which we haven't seen in a while, but that's fine. Would be great to see Spawn's reaction to this gentle giant. I don't know that this guy is reading the same book as us.
Yeah.
I just hope he can get past his paranoia and realize that not everyone is against him and that some people are victims too, like Cygor. What is happening here?
Person's really connecting with Cygor. Remember when I was like, I wish I loved this ape? This guy was fully feeling everything I was lacking. Real quick, just to jump backwards just slightly when we talk about the is the other option I thought it could be, because I couldn't remember exactly what they looked like, was in 1996, Izzy was the mascot for the Atlanta Olympics.
Oh, right. I do weirdly remember that.
Just a little blue shape called What's It or Izzy or It's It. And so I thought maybe that was something it was referencing here, this guy, because it was the Olympics, and that year I was there. I did get to go to some of the Olympics. And
really?
Oh, yeah, of course.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I saw the gold medal match for the handball event.
European handball or American handball?
Olympic handball, bud.
But is that the one with the goals?
I guess, yeah.
Not against the wall.
Like, it was no, it was not that. It was like soccer almost.
Yeah. That's European handball.
I want to say Bosnia won, or either that I got the second. It was Bosnia versus the Czech Republic, I believe. Anyway, also I got to go to many Paralympic events, and I got to go into the stadiums and stuff for that one because my mom's ex-husband used to coach Paralympic teams.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like that as much as anybody is learning lore about Spawn on this podcast, they're also learning lore about us.
That's true. Yeah. Yep.
We're something of a Spawn ourselves.
That's right. Well, even more so after this issue, once we learned Egg Simmons back there.
So, yeah, this guy continues. I just want to let you know that I'm enjoying the bi-weekly installments of one of the best comics out there today. I like the different focus of each book, as well as the different art teams. Keep up the wonderful work and watch out for falling debris. Love the Spawn toys. Yours in faith, C. Corey Omer, Covington, Kentucky. Well, C. Corey Omer, I hope you're doing well out there. Sounds like you love Cygor a lot. Todd says, In issue 50, Al will be suddenly coming to grips with many of his problems, leaving behind some of the debris which hangs over his head. Then I'll be able to move him off in some direction where he can best use the powers and skills that he has. As for the little men helping the curse, no, they're not Izzy's. They're hand-built creations made by the curse, which I'll probably get into further if and when the curse ever returns. Watch out for Cygor's return, and Spawn will realize that he can create his own kind of monster and does battle with and against him.
All right.
So that's the first letters column. There's a bunch of like Toy Fair 96 stuff. The
Hell
pictures
yeah.
are incredible.
I remember the Toy Fair 96 Wizard special.
There's also some solid pinups. We got this one of medieval Spawn and like a damsel, the cool horse. We got this one.
Angela with Spawn and chains. Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Harkening back to how they exchanged fluids or whatever. They swapped plasms.
Oh, yeah. Which is, again, kind of a thing right now.
Yep.
And so then we have Spawning Ground in number 47. And there's a little note from Todd. And it says, it's been approximately a year now since pre-production began on the HBO animated Spawn series. The process of animation is long and complicated, similar to the making of the feature film. Alan McElroy, who wrote the New Line script, wrote all 6 episodes with some help from Todd along the way. In addition, Todd had to have written his introductions, right?
Evil. Good. The forces of darkness and light.
Imagine, if you will. In addition to the major characters, there'll be cameos from some of your favorites, such as Overkill, Chapel, and Angela. Voices were cast last fall, and 5 of the 6 episodes have been recorded. Richard Dysart from LA Law is doing the voice of Cog, while Keith David of Clockers and Dead Presidents will be bringing our caped hero to life. Keep your eyes open for a feature on HBO called Behind the Scenes. They brought their cameras to a couple of taping sessions, interviewed Todd along with some of the actors. Oh, we got to track that down. I wonder if it's on YouTube. We'll let you know when it'll be running so you can tune in. Yes, we know everyone doesn't have HBO. Anyway, he talks about all that. Todd tried to keep the look of the characters as close to the comic book as possible. Greg Capullo even put his personal touch on some of the designs. So that's kind of cool. I didn't realize that Greg got to be part of the team behind the show.
That's great.
Yeah. The letters in this one basically just kind of saying, hey, I don't like the coloring because you changed colorists, which we've talked about a few times, even though we don't think that that's a bad thing necessarily. They're just kind of different approaches. Mm-hmm. And then some people being like, don't change anything. Everything's great. And Todd being like, cool, man, thanks. So nothing super great here. I do like that he prints so many letters from teenagers. I don't know. It's got to be cool. Have you ever written into a comic book and gotten it printed?
I've written letters, but never sent them.
I never wrote one in.
I've done the closest thing you can do now, which is write endlessly about comic books on the internet.
Yeah, I guess we made up for it, huh?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Closing thoughts on, oh God, what were these called? Revenge and Twisted?
Closing thoughts are that I thought this arc had its ups and downs. It had some moments where I was like, ooh, why'd we have to do that? But overall, it moves pretty well. It cooks just fine. And when you get down to the nitty gritty of the dichotomy between Tremor and Spawn and how Tremor's presence in Spawn's life kind of catalyzes the next, hopefully, phase in the behavior and conviction of Al Simmons, I think it winds up in a pretty tight little package.
This is really the first time that it really feels like things are all coming together. It's got to be crazy to listen to our podcast because we probably say this kind of thing.
This is the first time Spawn really feels like it's working as intended.
But as we barrel to issue 50, this does feel like we're trying to prune the story a little bit, right? We're trying to cut off the things that are not working as well, or kind of get them into a place where they're ready to be ended, right, so that Spawn can move forward. And Todd kind of says as much in the letters column, right? Where he's like, after 50, I'm going to be able to do some stuff with Spawn that I wasn't able to do before, because not that he wrote himself into a corner, but he wrote himself into circles.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe he's making some peace with the supernatural elements of Spawn a
I
little
think he's
bit.
finding his way into them. I think he's finding a way to connect to them with like the eerie creatures of the dirt and shit like that. That seems to be something that he is. He seems to like it, whether anyone else does or not. I think it's fine. I think it's a little, kind of silly, but I think that speaks to the level of thought that he was previously giving to those concepts, like the metaphysical aspects of Spawn. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of just like, yeah, well, then the worms in the dirt are evil.
I do think, though, the thing that is getting lost, and no, this makes sense because it's happening to Al in real time. Al is losing his humanity,
Right.
right? Um, Even though he claims it in this two-parter, right? When he's yelling at Cog,
Right.
but we're getting less Wanda. We're getting less Terry. I know Terry's sick.
Got
We're
COVID.
getting less Cyan. We're getting less. We got no Sam and Twitch, who you'd
Yeah.
think would be somewhat involved with mafia guys dying, sorta, at least. You
Honestly,
know?
though, at the same time, I'm kind of glad that Todd is leaving behind some of those little bits where he could have diverted from the story being told. Like, did we need 2 pages of Sam and Twitch for this
No,
story necessarily?
because otherwise this two-parter would have been a six-parter.
Exactly. So he's learning when to trim the fat. I think, we're 50 issues in. Hopefully, by 100 issues in, we'll be at a point where it's finding a balance of how to check in with everyone at the pace we need to check in with them without getting weighed down in like 2 pages of this guy, 2 pages of this guy, like, that Return of the King feeling.
Yeah, we've gotten so many check-ins in the past that now it feels that this feels propulsive because it's just not 1,000 characters. It's a handful, and that's good. So,
And we're
and also,
seeing a lot of it come to fruition in its own arc.
yeah, uh, can't wait to see Tremor again.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to be doing great.
Tremor is always having a bad time, and it's kind of nothing's Tremor's fault. So I love him.
Yeah, he is just a precious little baby who
Yeah.
needs to be protected. The kind of precious baby who murders people in the toilet and sends their head to their boss or whatever.
Hey, he didn't murder the guy on the toilet. He chained him to a pillar. He maybe murdered him off panel.
Other people were murdered by him.
True. But listen, he was turned into a mutant cyborg. Interestingly, he never uses his cyborg arm in this
No, he doesn't.
arc.
Whatever.
It's fine. Doesn't matter.
Maybe I'll figure that out later.
Also, Vito Gravano does not explain how they're going to send him back to Sicily without a human brain.
Well, they want to capture him. They think they're going to catch him, and they have like plans to finish the procedure that like didn't go right or whatever. There's
We
like
didn't
a
really
line
get
or
into
two.
it.
Well, there's a line or two in there, and we kind of just breeze past that specific
But like,
spot.
what's their plan?
He doesn't say. He just says that like we're going to finish the experiment, and then he's going to go to Sicily to be their new enforcer. So like, I assume
Do you think they'll put like overt kill stuff on him? Like he'll get like a little yellow
that would have been dope,
eye
actually.
patch and stuff.
Like Tremor evolved, Cyber Tremor.
It's not a bad idea.
Call us,
Todd. Todd, that idea is copywritten.
Yeah.
On
Call
this
our
podcast.
lawyer.
Thanks, Rob. Anyway, anything else you want to add?
No, I think we covered it. This is a pretty tidy 2-issue arc of Spawn. We're getting better at that. We're getting better at those, Todd and company are getting better at those, like, just 2 issues. Despite the flaws in the art, the approach, I think, instead of going, like, one story arc in this issue, another story arc in this issue, just going back to back and doubling up the story arc is a better idea, at least. It feels better to read.
Yeah. Especially the way we're reading it, where we get to read it.
Right. We get
right
to binge
away.
it. Yeah.
But I wonder if it was like month to month. I try to think of these things as month to month because I try to think of what that experience is like. And
Right.
I'm like, it would work. I think it would work. Where there's sort of repetition and stuff.
It works a little better.
Spawn doesn't want you to go back and read the previous issue right before you read the new issue. It just wants you to be like, yeah.
Well, that's
Just-
a very common thing for comics at this point still too. We haven't quite reached a point where like most monthly comics are totally devoid of that Silver Age repetition and like just describing what's happening, you know. There's still some of
True.
that very much in the style of the day.
True. Before we get to our kind of closing, I will read the little at the end of 47. There's a little here's what's coming of 48 and 49. So Spawn number 48. With so many people trying to track him down, Spawn builds a new hideout for himself. He finally decides it's time to hide from those who hunt him. Finally decides? He's been hiding the whole time. Sam and Twitch continue their search, wanting to question him. McFarlane, Daniel, Conrad. Spawn number 49. Spawn has a face-to-face confrontation with Sam and Twitch. Our hero continues to build his new hideout away from everyone, including the bums. But his solitude cannot protect him from the fact that someone whom his wife loves is dying. And then it says, who, me? McFarlane / Capullo.
COVID's going to get real bad before it gets better, y'all.
Also, that's hilarious solicit text because it's like, Wanda has only ever met 5 characters in the course of this comic book. So it's a bit of a spoiler there.
Yes,
that Terry's
absolutely.
dying.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, if you've been a reader and you've seen what's been going on with him,
you can put 2
you
and 2
pretty
together.
much already know.
Yeah. George, where can people find you if you want them to find you?
You can find me here at Spawnography every week. And you can also find my writing every rootin' tootin' day over at newsarama.com. You can find some of my music on YouTube at Witch Crisis. My band is kind of on hiatus right now, but we still have music on Bandcamp. It's Hypersleep. We're on Bandcamp, Spotify, all the places where they do those things for people. And yeah, that's it. I don't really have a lot of personal social media right now.
Cool. Yeah, you can find the show at Spawnography Pod or at Spawnography on various social media, Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram. I've been very bad about posting, but I promise I'll get better. I sometimes just get kind of bogged down with work stuff and whatever. You can find me at PE Lightning or at lapsed.punk, and I don't make any music right now. So I don't have that to add. If you can, please rate, review, subscribe to the show. It really, really helps. You can leave comments now on Spotify. So
leave nice ones.
Yeah. If you don't, I'll just delete them. So
or I'll kill you.
But you can, listen to us on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all the places. Yeah. And what's crazy, George, at this point, we've been doing this for 6 months. So
wow.
I mean, technically longer because we record in advance, but we've been releasing for 6 months. So
pretty incredible. Go
thanks,
us.
buddy.
Thank you too, and thank you to all of our listeners now and forever, in perpetuity and beyond. So yeah, well, absolutely,
George. For Todd so loved the world,
he gave his only begotten Spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn.
Spawn!